So I was thinking, wouldn't it be fun to have every episode where I tell a story about myself?
That
To
would be
really
fun.
educate, to let everybody into the mind of me.
I do enjoy hearing your stories, so I would be down for that.
What do you think? You think our audience would?
Um, they might be a little scared, but I think they'd be okay.
Or is that something we shouldn't reveal to our audience? What goes on inside this noodle?
But anyone that knows you, they would find entertainment in
I
that.
think they would. I mean, I've got some pretty good stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, especially after weekends. I mean, like this morning, I told you about Orange Kitty.
I think it would be better though if you reenacted these stories into some sort of video.
Oh, well, that'd be kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But this is kind of a video because we got the cameras rolling.
Yeah, but you got to act it out.
Oh, act it out? Oh, I don't know if we want to do that. As those aren't the type of stories that I want to be telling. That might look a little bad. We really don't want the audience to know that. But talk about storytelling. Today we have got Kristen Sweeney from Every Little Word, sorry, that's going to be on with us and talking to us about storytelling. So here we go. Hey everyone, this is Skip Ranke,
And Emma Opperman Vote,
and welcome back to the Main Street Marketing Podcast.
a podcast where we discuss anything and everything marketing.
And today we are going to talk about one of the most powerful things you can use in marketing, and it is storytelling. And we have got the best guest for that. We've got Kristen Sweeney from Every Little Word. She has got 15 years of working in storytelling and helping people and businesses with complex issues and creating some really awesome content. So Kristen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome.
All right, jumping into it. With your experience that you have, why do you think storytelling is such a powerful tool for businesses in today's crowded digital space?
I mean, the space is certainly more crowded than ever. And one of the things I think about in terms of storytelling is it's kind of this shortcut to differentiation, right? Every brand is looking to stand out. But the fact is, there's a lot of competition. And for most organizations, you've got easily a dozen competitors who pretty much have your same set of capabilities, right? And so, in a way, we've also seen that informational content has kind of continued to degrade, especially with the proliferation of generative AI. Anyone can pretty easily create content that is just going to provide you the facts. So what is it now that's going to allow brands to stand out? And I really think it is what is becomes more personal. It's the stories. It's the story of your brand. It's the stories of your customers. It's the stories of the leaders and the experts inside your organization. And I work with a lot of service-based businesses, and for me, those stories are actually very important to bring and make them externalized, because when you go in and work with an organization, right, you're getting people who have a specific set of expertise, who have had specific experiences, and their opinions and their perspectives are shaped kind of by all of their stories. And so for me, not only does storytelling help companies stand out and look different when they're competing in this very crowded landscape where their competitors are able to produce the same kind of generic content at scale, but it's also giving customers a window into like, this is what it's going to be like to actually work with our organization, because we're really externalizing all of that background and context that kind of makes a company who it is.
So with that being said, then you've worked with a lot of different in service-based industries. I mean, you've worked with probably a lot of different clients. So talk about a place where, or a time when somebody really nailed it with a story, and what made it so effective.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of ways to do storytelling well. So two different examples come to mind. So the first is a management consulting firm called Cruise and Company. And I have worked personally with their founder for, I think, 6 or 7 years. At one point, I was chief of staff of the organization. At one point, I led marketing inside the organization, and they're now a long-standing client of ours. And I'm actually working with the CEO on his book, which is set to publish early next year. So I am very, very ingrained. We've kind of a mind meld with the CEO over there, Eric Cruz. And one of the things Eric does really well is he has embraced his personal, like he's embraced the very personal side of storytelling. Um, One of the things that really connects him with his clients is that he is an entrepreneur, just like the clients that he works with. He's not kind of, his brand is like very much to not be the consultant who sits in the high tower and dispenses advice, but he runs a couple of different companies. Not only the management consulting firm, but a commercial painting business. He's had other companies as well. And so he gives this very like in the trenches perspective. And a lot of times that means coming in and being like, here's something that's not working in our business, and I'm going to talk to you about it. And, or here's a struggle that we went through. So he's really embraced finding those specific stories and kind of reaching out to his audience and saying, can you relate? And we have done that for the duration of our relationship with a weekly newsletter. So he's really feeding them and building that relationship week by week with his audience. And he recently wrote kind of, we like wrote together kind of a meta article about it, which was which posts do the best. It's always the more personal ones. So the more he's talking about, his struggles as an entrepreneur, his challenges, the more he's getting kind of into mindset, and the more he's just willing to reveal and be transparent with his audience, the more he's able to really build the relationships and build trust with them. There's another organization that comes to mind for me. Wagner Machine is a precision machine shop in Champaign, Illinois. We did some work with them, and their tagline is making the impossible possible. So, long story short, they take on the really hard projects that other machine shops aren't willing to do. And they've taken this tagline and really created this kind of body of work that tells the story of what it means to make the impossible possible. So we've collaborated with them on kind of mini case studies where they have literally worked on quantum computers, where they have created parts that were made of gold, that they've taken on these projects that other shops rejected, that other shops said, like, there's no way you're going to get that done. And consistently, they keep telling that story. And so I think that's a good example of how an organization can have a story that isn't always personal. It's not about, here's this thing that happened in my childhood or this formative experience, but it's this very simple tagline that then translates to the way they want to present themselves in the market by kind of taking that small narrative and just finding different ways to share it over and over again.
Well, I think you led into like that ties into the emotion, which creates that trust. Talk to us a little bit about the loyalty that goes behind these, and it not necessarily emotional storytelling, but any storytelling has a kind of emotion associated with that.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the kind of primal, origins of storytelling, right? It's like people gathering around a campfire and connecting with one another. We have a lot of, for better and for worse, probably, we have a lot of technology now. It kind of that stands in the way of those kind of interactions and stands between them. But that humans don't evolve nearly as quickly as our technology has, right? So that human need is still there, and I think even more so in an environment where it's harder to know there's a lot of mistrust and distrust in the environment, frankly. And so personal connections are becoming, I think, an even more valuable currency. And storytelling helps create that personal connection, even sometimes with a brand, because you're opening up, you're sharing, you're being a little bit more vulnerable. And so whether you're building like a parasocial relationship with an executive who you really admire, a leader of an organization, or you're aligning with a company's mission or their cause because they're telling that story, it can really build affinity. And to take that into, sales and revenue, like what is all this storytelling actually doing for your business? It's memorable, right? And there's all sorts of information showing that like one key to revenue is being part of the early consideration set. That if you're just trying to reach a buyer by the time they're evaluating solutions, you're too late, right? So
Hmm.
stories, more than statistics, are the way to kind of stick in people's minds to earn that trust, but also to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned something about the personal connections, and that's an essential ingredient in any story. But are there other things that have to be present for storytelling in a storytelling environment just besides that personal connection?
Yeah, I think passion of the storyteller is one. So I've done a lot of work with a lot of B2B companies, and I've long said, like, I can get excited about anything if my client is excited about it, right?
Hmm.
So I have a client who sells life insurance. He actually transitioned from being a medical physician and moved into selling life insurance. And the way he talks about his career path and what he does and how he helps individuals and families is really inspiring. Frankly, life insurance is not an area I would have picked to be, find like thrilling, right?
Right.
But that individual passion, that is something that cannot be faked. So that I think is really important. And the ability of an organization to kind of be willing to let that passion come through. So sometimes you've got the kind of the bureaucracy of an organization or the kind of like corporate, I don't know, corporate apparatus kind of like clamps down, right? And it kind of can like squelch like the originality and the passion, and it tends towards safety and wanting to make things a little more sanitized. So I think there has to be a courage, a willingness to um, say things a little differently, be a little bit vulnerable and a little bit raw. Because if you're not saying anything different, then kind of back to our first conversation point, you don't have the differentiation. Then your
Hmm.
story isn't really going to land because it's a little bit hollow. It doesn't have the substance that an audience is really looking for.
Yeah.
I think the other ingredients are so not playing it too safe for sure, and then tying back the story itself to your audience. So it's not just enough to tell stories, but we are talking about telling stories in a business context. And so we've got to also keep that in mind that this has to serve a broader strategy. It's not just like, here's me and my dogs. Like that can be great, but why?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and content like that can have a purpose. Not everything has to be like, and here's a life lesson. Like
Hmm.
that's not necessary either, but it's got to be intentional.
Now, a lot of our listeners are small business owners that sometimes have a little bit more limited resources. Do you have any advice for that audience on creating these compelling pieces of collateral to tell their stories?
So I'd say that the great thing about storytelling is like you are your own best resource. So start with you and your own stories. I think it can be helpful to surface like whether that's the narrative of your career, whether it's kind of an expanded version of why your business exists, or maybe a really formative experience in your life that has like shaped your perspective on the work that you do. Kind of bubbling up those 1 to 3 kind of key narratives. And then I would say when it comes to actually creating content, um, to me, pick a channel and pick a medium that works well for you. So if you are gonna love turning on the camera and recording yourself on video and being able to like put that out there quickly, great. If you want to write long form because that's a better fit for you, great. Start a Substack or start a newsletter. But don't choose the channel. You want to choose the channel based on your audience, but you also need to choose the channel based on what you can actually accomplish, especially with really limited resources, because at the end of the day, your kind of willingness and personal commitment to move something forward is going to be a really key ingredient in ever getting your stories out there in the world.
That's
That's a
great.
good point.
That's
I
a
like that.
really great point.
Mm-hmm.
And but from a business perspective, from like a results perspective, I mean, so storytelling can move the needle in a lot of different ways. So have you had with what are some, like, if was there one case that stands out in your mind where somebody did a story, they leaned into their story and it really provided some massive, like a big churn, a big turnaround, or a big change, big sales, whatever that goal was, whatever that was. Is there one thing that, or one case that really stands out in your mind that you've, over your 15 years, that just like, bam, that was the key?
We're working with a couple of executives right now, and admittedly, they're not key salespeople in their
Mm-hmm.
organizations, right? So they have more of this brand visibility goal. They want to build their personal brand on behalf of their organization because they
Mm-hmm.
recognize that being a key figure in their company is one way that they're going to earn attention and build trust with their audiences. And we have seen like remarkable growth in terms of their visibility, 50% growth relative to the prior period and things like that. I think in general, though, I would caution a little bit against like trying, this is kind of the content problem overall, right?
Yeah.
Doing one specific asset and then being like, well, how many dollars did that one thing create
Mm-hmm.
for us?
Exactly.
I think that in general, if storytelling is more like this, how you do it than what you do. So it's really important that those key stories might live in a document somewhere, but they have to be woven into particular channels or particular campaigns. And then you're going to want to assess based on the standard ways of measurement. I wouldn't necessarily measure storytelling differently if I put it in an email campaign than other email campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
But I might compare, right? Like how this more storytelling oriented version of my emails is performing maybe to prior campaigns or versions.
Yeah.
The only exception is I will say with when you start to incorporate more storytelling, don't ignore the qualitative feedback. People have all sorts of like kind of cute acronyms for what this means, but basically, it's the people who reply to your email and like share 2 paragraphs with you because something really moved them. It's the
Mm-hmm.
people who come up to you in real life at events and say like, I'm following you on LinkedIn, although they never like any of your posts.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff can be harder to weave into a very sort of data oriented story. But when you start to connect with people on a more human level, you will likely find you get those kind of qualitative responses. And so really make sure that those are part of the consideration set when you evaluate like how well is this working.
That's so
That's
true.
that
I
is
like that.
so true.
Now, on the flip side, so you have the success. Are there common mistakes that you've seen businesses or individuals take during their storytelling?
Yes, three big mistakes come to mind. So the first is that companies play it too safe. That every kind of piece of content that has a chance to be a little bit differentiated feels like recycled company messaging points. And of course, like company level messaging exists for a reason. And if you're trying to promote individual thought leaders, let's say, like you don't want them just like to have total free reign of what they're doing. That again, that needs to tie back to what the company's trying to accomplish. But if you have a piece of content, let's say you've a byline article you're trying to place somewhere, and it could have like any leader's name slapped on it from your organization. It doesn't have any essence of something that is unique to them, something that has shaped their perspective. You're playing it too safe. You're not digging deep enough into like individual experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The second mistake is kind of in the opposite direction. And I see this more, so that would be, I would say, usually a slightly larger company mistake. Smaller company mistakes tends to be oversharing. So you've probably seen this on LinkedIn.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes you get these posts and you're like, that medical procedure or that other thing that happened, like we're going a little too personal here. Um, like just again, like your mileage may vary on that. People have different levels of comfort, but I think sometimes, I certainly have seen content that feels like it borders on like cringe. And I'm like, I understand what they're trying to do, but I'm feeling uncomfortable
Yep.
by this. I'm actually getting more distance instead of feeling closer to this
Mm-hmm.
person because I'm like, I don't know if we'd be talking about that if I were in front of you. So that's another mistake. And then the third is kind of this. think misaligned expectations around what storytelling needs to be, and this ties in a little bit to something I see where there's conversation about how brands can how no how companies can stand out, and it's like you've got to have personality, you've got to be bold. Um, Not every brand is bold, and not every brand has a personality that's like witty and funny and full of memes. Like, especially with a lot of the, service-based organizations we work with, like that's not the experience their clients want coming in, right? They don't want to be exchanging jokey emails. They want like an extremely professional level of service. They want quality. They need trust. And so I think it's important to think about storytelling as, again, an amplification of your own experiences of the culture of your organization, and not trying to kind of like pick something out of a hat and say like, okay, now this is our personality or how we're going to tell stories or how we're going to present externally. It should really be just what's already happening in your org amplified.
That's awesome. I you don't really think about it that way sometimes, but when you say it like that, it's like, yeah, that's not everybody wants that. That's a really good point. So, okay, now looking ahead though, we have the crystal ball. The technology's constantly changing. Obviously, we've been seeing that. I mean, AI, for example, is shaping our future, but how is that going to affect storytelling?
So I think there are multiple camps on this. I tend to fall in the camp of that it's going to make storytelling even more valuable, because one of the things that AI can't capture and replicate at scale is your own personal experiences. Um, so I think it will continue to be a differentiator, and it will continue to be a way to earn attention and really build trust with audiences at a time when more and more um, everything is kind of questioned, right? I know even for myself, I find like if I hear a headline or like, did you see this video of that? And my first instinct now is like, is that real?
Uh huh.
So
No, that's a good point.
um, so I think that's important. Got to give the disclaimer, of course. We use AI tools in our workflows already. We have for quite some time. So I'm not anti, we say we're not anti-AI, we're just pro-human. Um, I do think AI for some folks can be helpful for capturing ideas.
Hmm.
Still, to me, the ideal scenario, though, is a dialogue with another human. So we prefer, when possible, to directly interview, our experts and executives. We have an approach called the expert-led content approach, and for us, it's a lot of what we've been talking about, which is like bubbling up knowledge and stories that come from inside an organization, and then figuring out how to turn those into content and communication assets. Um, and to me, a lot of the magic, it's not in the interview questions you come up with. It's in the live dialogue and engagement with somebody where you can interact in real time and say, like, say more about that piece, or is this like that? And give kind of an example for them to relate to, or take the conversation in another direction entirely. Engaging with AI to kind of capture information isn't quite the same, and I think it doesn't produce quite the same depth of content, but it can be a useful bridge, especially for folks who are a little bit more resource limited, to either help me generate some questions that you can then ask me. Certainly, kind of some of the basic tools like a note-taking tool, so you can maybe record your thoughts out loud and then pull that transcript. All of that has opportunity to improve efficiencies, and I think especially for smaller business owners, make some of this work a little bit more feasible.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So much insight. That's really helpful. I think that gives our listeners a lot to think about. So we're gonna transition here into some rapid questions, short little takeaways that our listeners can have. I know we could get in depth with some of these questions,
Yep.
but we'll go for the short takeaways. So Skip, lead us here with some of these rapid questions.
So we might have covered this already, but what's a common myth about storytelling?
I think that it always has to be this like, here's what happened to me kind of a story. That's a very important aspect. But you can storytell about a brand, you can storytell about your mission. I think even in the level of a content asset, like you can use an article and storytell about very technical information. It has to do with the way you kind of lay out ideas in a narrative and link them so that somebody is very naturally inclined to move into like, and what happens next?
Hmm.
What do I need to know next?
All right. What's the wildest story that you've ever come across as part of what you do?
I won't share too many details, but it does involve a federal raid by the FBI.
Ooh.
Oh my. Oh my. I was going to say that probably goes right into, well, that's okay. Moving on. What's the most memorable brand story you've ever seen as part of what you do?
I kind of went with my gut here on this, and to me, Nike, just since I was a
Yep.
kid, has an
Hmm.
ethos. And again, they're not telling like one story, right? So this is a great example of a brand using storytelling. Like every commercial is its own story that ties into this bigger narrative that they have. Um, but I just think they're wonderful storytellers and really a testament to the fact that leaning into brand and storytelling helps sell a lot of shoes.
Hmm.
No,
That's a great
that's a
example.
very good example. So what is something new that you've learned recently?
I recently enrolled in, I want to get, it's a free open learning Harvard course on the economics of healthcare. And so I am learning a lot about the structure of our
Hmm.
healthcare system, including Medicare and Medicaid and payments and
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
dry but also fascinating stuff. Very
Yeah, I
relevant.
can. I was in insurance in a previous life, so I can understand that. I'm the kind of guy that reads an insurance policy, so that's how boring I am.
Ah,
So,
uh-huh.
so tell me what's an unpopular opinion or a hill that you're willing to die on?
You can't measure everything that matters.
There you go.
Hmm.
I like that.
Hmm.
All right, what is something that you've read or that you saw recently that you'd recommend to somebody?
It's so funny. I wrote down something I've read and something I saw, and it's like very it's it's Eastern. So A Gentleman in Moscow is a book I've read recently that I really enjoyed. It's about um a man in Russia who ends up having to live in a hotel for multiple decades because he's essentially like a political prisoner and he's allowed to live, but only if he doesn't leave the hotel.
Oh my.
And then Eastern Gate is a great Polish TV show I just finished recently, and it's about spies.
Mm.
Big thriller.
All right. I'm going
Nice.
to check that out. I like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. All right. If listeners could take away one thing from today, what would that be?
Storytelling is a good investment for your business. It builds trust, it connects you to your audience, and it differentiates you from your competitors. So a lot of bang for your buck there.
Awesome. Kristen, thank you so much for coming on the show with us today. This was awesome. We know that our listeners are going to be able to pull a ton of
Hmm.
information from this, and we really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for coming on.
Jim, Emma, great to be here with you. Thank you.
All right. Take care. That was fascinating.
Lots of great takeaways from
I
that.
mean, yeah, I mean, she really nailed it with regards to storytelling and how it can help a business. I mean, if you think about it, well, one thing that I was thinking about is what space are you going to use your story in?
Yeah.
So many people try to fit something into an area that doesn't work.
Or they fit it into every possible area they
Yeah,
can, and then naturally you have that result.
right. And I just was that was you don't think about it that way. You're like, oh, I got this piece, I want to use it everywhere,
Hmm.
and it doesn't work.
I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me is when she talked about that qualitative data, right? People opening up to you, right? It's
Abs-
not all about the engagement, the likes, the comments, and how often do we hear that for people, especially when it comes to video,
right.
right? And they have a video promo that they're running somewhere, and they're constantly having people say that, oh, I saw you there, and they wouldn't say that if it wasn't memorable. Right. And
Yeah,
if they
right.
weren't telling that story. And so I think that qualitative data is so important.
And we've had that's a really interesting point because what she brought up because we do commercials for clients
Hmm.
and they tell their story, or they're talking about their business or whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
and people come up and say, "Hey, I saw your commercial or I saw your summary about this one job or whatever."
You're the guy from YouTube.
Yeah, right. And they say, well, it's not always about the revenue when it comes to that, because it may not have that instantaneous return in that way, shape, or form. But it's with being memorable. When something they do need you, they're going to do it. And I think what she talked about there as well is about having the passion, and having it be being authentic with it, because you can tell when people are, they're just kind of rolling with the punches, and that they don't have that passion with it. It's like, okay, so, and it doesn't always have to be the same person telling. It doesn't always have to be me, for example, telling a story.
Right. Everyone has a story or a way to relate to someone. The passion that it can come from anybody. Yeah,
that was. I mean, I like to be on camera, but I'm just kidding. But but that was really interesting, because you've got a story all on its own, and Nate has a story, and Ella, everybody's got a story. It doesn't always have to be me. So you're going
to have to go back and brainstorm some ideas now.
You're going to be on camera more. So no, it was really interesting. I thought that was, I really love talking with her about that. I've got some ideas I have to talk to her about other stuff too now. So, but that was pretty awesome. The Main Street Marketing Podcast is hosted by Skip Ranke
and Emma Opperman-Vogt.
And you can catch us on all the places you get your podcasts.
Or you can find us on our YouTube channel, Paragon Marketing Group.
Thanks for stopping by today.